name is Andrei Roșca. We are at MiniStories, Târg de Carte pentru Copii, organizat de Cărturești. Today we meet Kimberly Brubaker Bradley, author of The Word That Changed My Life, translated from Romanian as Război care mi-a schimbat viața. Hi, Kimberly. How are you doing today?
I'm really good. Thank you for having me.
How are you doing today? How is it in the US exactly right now?
It's a very pretty day here today. It's cool. It's winter, but the sun is shining. I've been out with my dogs. It's very good. It's only about noon here. It's much earlier.
It's currently 7 p.m. for us, and it's very early, already nighttime. So what do you want the Romanian audience to know about you? When did you start writing, and what triggered you to do it?
So I started writing when I was in university. I studied science. I studied chemistry.
Really?
But I did. But a friend of mine said, well, we should take this class on children's literature. It would be interesting and it would be something different. And so I did. And it was taught by someone who was a quite well-known writer in the United States. Her name was Patricia McLaughlin. She's still alive. She's quite old. So I got kind of interested in it that way. And I started writing stories, and I started getting things published when I was still in college. Not books, but magazine articles, that kind of thing. And then I had a regular job for a few years, but after I got to where I could write enough that people would pay me for my stories, I just started doing that. My first novel came out in 1998. So a long time ago. And I've been writing ever since. The Word That Saved My Life is my first book published in Romania, but it's actually the first, the 15th that I have published in the United States.
15.
Yeah, 15.
With so many books, I wonder which one is your favorite? Do you have?
Probably my very newest one, which is going to be published in Romania, but I'm not sure if it's out yet. It's called Fighting Words in the United States. And so it is book number 17. I had The Word That Saved My Life, Where I Finally Won, and then Fighting Words is my new one. It's very, very different, but I like it.
I've actually read a bit about it. It's apparently for young adults, and it tackles some pretty sensitive topics that I don't want to touch on.
Right. It is some difficult topics. It's actually a lot of difficult topics, but I think that some kids need to be able to see are having difficult lives, and they need to be able to see that in books too. So it's a book that's important to me.
I actually had another interview a week ago with Ben Miller, who also studied science, this time physics, in university. And just like I asked him, I want to ask you, why did you choose then to become a chemist? Why did you choose to do that? And how did chemistry help you just write stories, write books?
It is interesting. I think they're similar, but most people, I did work as a chemist for 4 years after university, but in both you're taking things and putting them together in new ways. It's both creative. I mean, there's only a certain number of letters in the alphabet, but every book puts them together in completely new ways. And that's kind of what you're doing in the lab too, is you're taking all these atoms and molecules and putting them together into something new. That's what you're trying to do. So I see them as more similar than most people. I know a couple of other writers who were scientists first. I don't know if E.L. Kenigsberg is the one that comes to mind, but you won't have heard of her. She wrote when I was a child, so a while ago.
And if you took writing courses to write children's books, and I got to ask, what is your style of writing? What is your thinking process? How do you make the characters, the main plot, the big idea?
Right. So all writers do differently. I don't write out the whole plot first. I don't figure out how. I usually have a character that I care about in my mind, and in a setting, maybe. So maybe World War II in England, or Fighting Words is set where I live in Eastern Tennessee. So and they have a problem, because you have to have a problem to have a book. And then I just start writing. So that means that I have to plot as I go. And so often I will have to write several times over. I'm known for writing 6, 7, 8 drafts of a book before I'm finished. Where I finally won actually took 9 full drafts. And I will change big things, not little things. It's not fixing the style. It's in the war that I finally won, I had a main character that I killed. Through the 7th draft, the character died toward the end of the book. And then I decided it was too much, so I let them live. But it's a pretty big change to make after you've already written 7 different versions, to say, oh, okay, never mind, they don't die. So
you really care about these characters, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, you get to know them very well, because I'm spending a lot of time with them and rewriting and thinking, is that what they'd say? Is that what they'd think? A lot of times writers I don't base things on a person I know, but maybe a little bit of this person and a little bit of that one and a little bit of this one, and put them together to make something new. So a lot of times I know what's influencing my characters, but I don't think readers can tell.
Speaking about your characters, what did Ada, the main protagonist of the war that saved my life, teach you? What taught you about writing her?
That's a good question. Ada, to me, is somebody that never gives up, and is she has a hard life, but she ends up being very honest with herself, I think, and continuing to try to do what she thinks is important and right. Ada's story actually, it is 2 parts. It's the war that saved my life and the war I finally won. But I think she's a person of terrific strength, and she doesn't quit. And that probably is something that that quality of hers helped me, because those were hard books to write. And there was one point where my publisher said, we could just forget this and move on to something else if you want. This doesn't have to be what you write next. But I was really determined to tell the story correctly, so we just kept working on it.
And the little subplot in the book is actually of Ada learning how to ride a horse,
Yes.
A horse named Butter.
Yes.
Do you like horses, however?
Yes. Yeah. No, I live on a farm. We have 3 horses now. I have a horse of mine that is retired. She got hurt and can't be ridden. I have a new horse I ride, and then my daughter has a horse that she rides. But Butter was based on a horse that we had. He died a few years ago. He was very old when he died. But my daughter got him when she was 8 years old, and he was the kindest horse in the world. And he would, anybody could ride him. We would people come to the farm and we'd let them ride, and he'd take them around the field. And the less they knew, the quieter he was and more careful. He was just the best horse. His name was Pal, which, do you know the word pal in English? It means buddy, friend. Yeah. Yeah. So that was his whole name, was Pal. And he was a wonderful horse. So he got to be Butter. The horse is important because, Ada doesn't really trust people. She's been kept locked up for so long. And so she needed a relationship that was going to be easier than a person. The horse doesn't see that she is dressed poorly or has a bad leg. The horse doesn't pay attention to any of that. So
why did you write then Ada to have a bad leg?
Really, because I wanted her to be, so the whole point of the book, the evacuation of school children in England in World War II, is a thing that happened, and they moved 3 million children to go live with complete strangers. And most of these children found it really, really stressful. because it was, it was in the middle of war. Their parents were staying in places that they thought were going to be bombed, and they were having to live with people that didn't really want them, but were being forced to take them. And so I thought, well, what if we turned it around and it was still a hard situation, but it was the best thing that could happen to someone? So who would that child be? And I started imagining a child that was in prison, really. I mean, just in the one room in England. I mean, she's poor, but she's also being kept under really bad circumstances. And I started realizing as I thought about it that if she was physically able-bodied, she would have already left. She would have figured a way out of that. She would have escaped. And so to keep her kind of imprisoned, I gave her a clubfoot, which keep her from being able to walk easily and keeps her kind of trapped in that situation at the start. That's where the thoughts for all of it came from.
All right, so the bad mother, about the
Yes.
mother who keeps Ada trapped. She is portrayed as a sort of greedy and heartless mother of sorts, sees most things as expenses. How can parents learn from this horrible mother and avoid being like her?
I would hope that they would think about what their children are capable of, and not what they're not capable of. But I don't know how much people learn from the bad mother so much as they learn from the good mother figure, Susan, who is the person that takes them in. Because Susan, pays attention even when Ada doesn't behave well. Susan understands kind of the reason understands her emotions, and sort of accepts who she is without a lot of questions and a lot of anger. So I think that Susan's the one I hope people learn from, not Ma'am so much.
So then what can we learn from Susan more specifically?
Probably to accept that children's emotions could come from a lot of different places, and that it's okay that if they to not be perfect, that however you are is an okay way to be for now, and you can keep trying and make yourself better. But she's never ashamed of Ada. She never feels like when Ada has trouble that it's something that can't be fixed.
Yes, indeed. And in one part, she accidentally breaks a sewing machine.
Yes.
And she's very scared since she believes that she got herself in a lot of trouble, but Susan treats it like it's nothing. She could fix it easily. It's just a broken nail.
Yeah, it's something that can be fixed pretty easily, but even then also, she didn't mean to do it. She didn't set out to break it. She just made a mistake. So Susan accepts mistakes and Ma'am doesn't.
About the book itself, however, did you ever expect it to become this big in Romania? Since, fun fact, in Romania, in a few textbooks, there are actual fragments of your work used for exercises.
That's really exciting. No, I mean, honestly, this is my first book that sold internationally, and we sold it to a lot of countries, Estonia and Italy, and not France. I wish we would sell to France, but England. There's an American English version and a British English version, which I think is funny. There's Polish. There's Greek. But Romania, it's more popular than most places. I mean, it's really, I was really pleased and surprised by that. And I don't know why, I don't know if it's the publisher or what it is that has made it more popular in Romania.
A lot of things, I believe. Yeah. And first off, there's, yes, the publisher. Indeed, it's a big publisher here in Romania. And also a big event in the 1980s where something happened and a lot of babies were born, and a lot of babies were basically like Ada, felt kind of
Okay.
alienated because they were considered subhuman of sorts.
Okay. So that you think that, and I do know about that. I remember that because they were in orphanages. Yes.
Yes, a lot of orphanages.
Yeah. Yeah. Was that part of Caseco's wanting people to have babies?
It was about people not wanting to have abortions.
Okay.
Yeah, very delicate subject, I know.
It is a delicate subject, but it's, I mean, unwanted children is a hard thing. That's pretty difficult for everybody. So.
And again, about books, your first book was actually set in World War One.
Yes.
What got you to write this book, The War That Saved My Life and The War That I Finally Won, and your first book, Ruthie's Gift? Why did you set them in the First World War and the Second World War?
Well, Ruthie's Gift, actually, it is set during the First World War, but it comes from a different place entirely. My grandmother grew up on a farm in Indiana, which is north of here, but it's a very rural area. And she had 3 younger brothers and 3 older brothers and no sisters. And she was always angry. Even when she was 90 years old, she was angry that she was the only girl in the family. And she was kind of a tomboy. She was, she got in a lot of trouble. And I knew my great uncles. I grew up knowing, and they all looked alike. They were bald men with bushy eyebrows and great big ears. And when I was quite small at family gatherings, I would climb onto their lap and I'd say, "Which one are you?" Because I couldn't keep them straight. So they'd say, "Well, I'm your Uncle Paul, dear." And I'd say, "Okay." But my grandmother, when I was little, I would go stay with her and she would tell me stories of the things that happened on the farm. And so Ruthie's Gift, her name was Ruth, and Ruthie's Gift was the stories she told me all woven together. So even though it's set during World War II, it's really her childhood that I'm writing about. And World War I, I mean. In World War II, for the war that saved my life and the war I finally won, it was really because I found that evacuation so interesting, that they moved all these children to the countryside. And before war was even declared, they shipped them all away. And that never happened anywhere else. I mean, it's an interesting historical time. That was what was interesting to me there. I'm actually working on another World War II book right now. It doesn't have a title yet, but it is set in France in an old castle during World War II, but it has Catherine de Medici's ghost in it because Catherine de Medici liked the castle. So we brought her back.
So what is your favorite character from your books? Which one of you considered your best? Well written?
I think, I mean, Ada's a more complicated character, but I really like Susan. But I think part of that is because Susan, for some reason, was very easy to write. Susan, sometimes she would just start saying something and I would just write it down, in my head. She would be talking and it was just easy. So I really liked Susan all the way around.
And your second favorite?
That would be Ada, yeah. Ada's good, but she was a little harder nut to crack. I had the beginning of the book, just the first couple of pages, I wrote over and over and over because I had to get Ada's voice right. Ada's the one who tells the story. And so you wanted it to be that she was in prison, but you didn't want it to be some hopeless, horrible mess from the beginning because no one wants to read that. So you had to know that she was strong and would come through right from the start, and it took a while to get that.
Interesting way of actually writing that character. So how do you write everything else then, if you got such an exotic way of making characters feel natural?
You just have to, I spend a lot of time writing. I mean, it becomes, I'm looking to see, I don't have any of my manuscripts around, but, I probably, for the war I finally won, I probably threw out 10 pages for every page I kept. So, you write and you write and you write, and then you say, no, that's not going to happen. And you write more. So it's not a very economical way to do it. It takes a while, but that's just what works for me. And I think everybody is different that way. I do better if I can write a book fast, but it won't be as good of a book. For me to write a good book, I have to write it slow and write it over and over. So I've learned that. I'd rather write, fewer good books than lots of bad ones.
What inspires you then to write these books? What inspires the story? What inspires the setting?
The setting depends. Sometimes I start with the setting, like I said, with the evacuation, but sometimes I'm starting with the character and they kind of let me know where the setting is. So, but what inspires is just all sorts of things. I mean, there's ideas everywhere. I have half a dozen ideas right now that I haven't started to write yet, but they're all in my head, kind of trying to decide which one comes next. So there's going to be another book with horses in it pretty soon, because I like to write about horses.
What can the main character from your book, What I Saved My Life, Ada, can teach us, just the viewers, about living and existing in the world?
Think about not letting your limitations, not letting the trouble you have be what defines you. Everybody has problems, but you can overcome them, and you can be a strong, good person, no matter where you start with.
And now let's learn something from you.
Okay.
What would you give writers, beginner writers, tips? What tips and tricks have you harnessed?
Well, one thing, most writers, not all of them, but most read a lot. And so I think reading things that interest you and then figuring out why are they interesting to you? What made that book good, if you can think about that. The biggest thing really is just, if you want to write, you have a story to tell, sit down and keep working on it, because most of the time, most of the time, the very first draft any writer writes is not good. It's bad. I have a lot of friends who are writers, and we have a rude word for what we call the first drafts. Lousy first drafts, only we say something worse than lousy. And that's everybody. And so sometimes people start writing and it's hard, and they think, oh, that means I'm not a good writer. No, it doesn't. It just means you haven't finished writing it yet. You have to write your way through to get to something good. So if you want to be a writer, just keep practicing. And I think that fan fiction on the internet, have you seen that?
Yes, I've seen it.
Yes, yeah. So I think it's a really good way to play with writing. It's a nice way in when you're starting, and you can kind of let your imagination go and just try something. There's not a lot at stake, but it's fun. And I think it's supposed to be fun, because it's going to be hard. And so if it's hard and awful, nobody wants that. But if it's hard and fun, yeah, that's fine. That's good.
Speaking again about writing, what are your writing rituals of sorts? What do you do?
I am sitting here in my office on my computer, and let's see, I have my coffee cup, and this is what my ritual is. As I come here and I sit down and I work in the mornings, especially. I mostly write in the morning. In the afternoon, I'll go work on our farm, take care of animals and things like that. But just to sit down and write almost every day. I mean, this is my job. So
it is your job? I thought
maybe
my job. You had another job on top of.
No, this has been my only job for more than 20 years now. So really almost 25 years. This has been my only job. And so I do take it seriously like a job. You have to, if you want it to be
so you consider
successful.
yourself sort of veteran at writing?
Yeah, at this point, yeah, sure.
And do you have any favorite authors? Like any poets or writer?
Yeah, I mean, poets, Nikki Grimes is an American poet. Amanda Gorman is new, but I really like her work. Lots and lots of writers that I love. I don't know what's been sold in Romania. As Elizabeth Wine writes World War II stories. One is called Codename Verity. I absolutely love her stuff. There's Jason Reynolds, Angie Thomas. Do you guys know the book The Hate You Give? I don't know. Like I said, I don't know what comes to Romania, but there's just so many. I mean, I read all the time, and I have so many writers that I love. Ruta Sepetys is one you guys need to know, because that new book is coming out in February. It's called I Must Betray You, and it's wonderful.
You've read it yourself?
Yes, I read it early. I read an early copy. I get to read some early copies sometimes from books by friends. She wrote a book called Between Shades of Gray. Ashes in the Snow is what I think they called it in Lithuania. That might be the Romanian title too. And one called Salt to the Sea, and they're World War II books that are very good. And they're actually kind of an Eastern European focus, which is a little rare for Americans.
What then is your opinion about Romania and Eastern Europe in general then?
I would actually love to visit Romania. I have been to Hungary and Bratislava. My family came from Poland, and I would really like to see Poland. I've been to Germany, but that's not really Eastern. So it's a lot of the country I haven't had a chance to explore yet. The pictures I've seen of Romania are beautiful, and I would really like to go there. It's all the political history is difficult, but it is for everywhere. So
yes, it's a really interesting history, and
yes.
It seems that a lot of your stories are based off of history.
Mm-hmm.
It seems you're like a very avid history fan.
Yes. Yeah, I really am. I think it's very interesting. I like to read about how regular people have, how their lives were in history, not so much the presidents and things.
Anyway, back to the books and writing.
Mm-hmm.
When do you consider that a book is finally complete, that it's made to perfection, it deserves to be published?
Usually, I have an editor who helps work with that, and she will usually push me a little harder than I think. So I'll think, well, it's about done now, and she'll say, no, you need to go back and think about these things here. And so it's really with my primary publisher that I can figure it out. So I've just finished this French castle book I was telling you, the first draft, and it's pretty good. It's not in bad shape, but when you kind of don't look at it for a few weeks and you start to think, oh, this part right here, that needs to be changed, and this character needs to do something different, and this part of the ending isn't working. And so I usually know when I've done enough to make it so that it's going to be a good book, but it's not there yet. And then I can kind of feel it when we really have it really, when it's really coming together. It's just a feeling you have, and you go through and make the last changes on the words and things. I like my books to, and this probably doesn't, the translation, it won't carry over, but I like them to be good read out louds, so that when you read them, it has a good rhythm. So I'll make changes at the end just for how the words sound. But as I said, that won't come through in the translation necessarily.
Then who do you get feedback from? If you've talked a lot about what do you consider about your works and other people's works. What do other writers who get to experience your stories early, who who are they and what their opinions are on the
Well,
books?
depends on the book very much. So for Fighting Words, the new one, which, as I said, you've said is a difficult subject, we had a lot of experts that we had it read it in early stages. People that took care of children that were in difficult situations, and people that were psychologists and things like that, and had them read it and make sure we were being truthful, but also not making it harder than it had to be. For the, you have to think, if there's a kid that's going to read it, you don't want them to be scared. You don't want them to be horrified. So we were very careful about the language. And then I did send it to, that book got sent out to friends of mine that have written about similar topics. There's not quite anything in the United States that's exactly like it, but some friends of mine that have written about that stuff. And I asked them for specific questions. Can you read this part and this part and tell me what you think of this scene or that scene? And that was a little more, because that's such a sensitive book. I asked for more help than with the war books. With the war books, I didn't, aside from my editor, not too many people helped. I do have a friend who lives in London. And so if I couldn't find an answer to a question, I would ask her, can you grow parsley in April during the war? Because they couldn't import food in. And so she will ask old women on the subway. She'll find somebody the right age and ask them weird questions. So that's good research.
Anyway, now on a completely different topic. You said you had kids, right?
Yes.
Son and a daughter, both in their 20s. Do they have similar jobs as yours?
Well, my daughter is still in school. She is in graduate school in England at the University of Leeds, getting a master's degree in medieval history. She had to take a gap year because of the pandemic. So last year she was home working here in town. My son actually works for the United States Soccer Federation, which is our football team, or not American, but European football. So the Olympic teams, the men's and women's national teams. But he works in the office. He's a financial analyst. So he has nothing to do with writing. My daughter might, but she hasn't so far. She has to decide what she wants to do when she's finished her education.
And do you believe that she would actually be able to do it, to become a good?
Yeah, yes, she's actually very talented. She is one of the people that reads my books in the early stages. And right at the end of the war I finally won, you have there's a bound galley, but they also have an electronic version before that that's almost finished. It's typeset, and so it looks like the real book. And she read it and said, "Oh, you've made this mistake here at the ending." But she told me about it, and I thought, "Ooh, she's right." So I called up my editor and I said, "This is what my daughter says we should do." And she said, "Okay, she's right. You need to do that." So we fixed it. And since then, my editor will say, "Have you shown this to your daughter? Has your daughter read this version yet? What does she think?" So it's very useful help. Yeah, I think if she wants to, it just depends, because it'll still be, it's still a lot of work. So she'll decide whether she likes to or not.
And before we got live, you told me that you actually used to play piano. What
Yes.
do you like? What music do you like? And how do you feel about the instrument itself?
I like it quite a lot. I mostly played sort of the easier classical pieces, fairly.
Momentan aveam dificultăți, s-a blocat ecranul Kimberly. Vom fi imediat. Sorry for the.
Yeah, sorry about that. I think it's my internet. What could you hear me say? I was talking.
We couldn't. You froze up and we heard nothing. I had
Okay,
to
so
put a camera. I thought it was just over there.
yeah, no. Go ahead and ask your question again, and I will answer.
So again, you used to play piano as a kid.
Oh yeah, yeah.
What do you feel about the instrument? What music do you used to play, and what music do you like?
Yeah, so mostly I was learning sort of easy classical stuff then. So, some Bach and Mozart when I was taking lessons. I liked Tchaikovsky a lot too. Edvard Grieg, I liked his music. But the latest music I bought for the piano is actually the Hamilton score. Do you know the musical Hamilton?
Yes, it's a
Yeah,
musical about President Alexander Hamilton.
Yeah, I love that musical, and I love the rhymes. I think it's very very smartly done. So I like to listen to that music, and I have that for the piano.
Anyway, on a completely other different subject, what scares you the most? What do you fear the most?
I don't like heights. I don't like being on bridges.
We
Down.
all
That's not good. I don't mind like being in an airplane, but I don't like being up high in bridges or anything like that. Other than that, I mean, you're always afraid for when you have children. You have to be afraid for them a little. You want everybody to be safe and happy. So that's probably the other thing I'm afraid of.
Then what makes you happy? What makes you feel calm, less stressed?
Well, certainly writing and reading, because I do
Of
read a lot.
course.
Yeah, but I also I go out and ride my horse. We have a small farm, and I'll just go out and ride in the fields. And I have a little mare that's black and white spots, and that really always makes me feel happier. So if I'm tense or unhappy, sad, angry, I go out and have a little run around the field, and
Kind
it's
of like
better.
how Ada does when she's mad or angry. She thinks about
Yeah,
butter.
no, exactly. That's where Ada gets it from. So that's always, and I like just to take walks out in nature too. I live in a pretty rural area, so I like to see that we live near
And
mountains.
okay, carry on. Sorry.
Oh, that's all. We're kind of near them. We can see
okay.
them, but
Okay, final question that I have. What would you recommend the audience? What books, what stories, whatever? What would you recommend our audience tonight?
Well, obviously both Ada books, but I would like people to read the new book Fighting Words when it comes out. I think it's a difficult book, but important, and it's also not always sad. It's funny because the main character there is very funny. Again, because I don't know what books you can get in Romania, it's harder to know. I think everybody should read Rita Sepeta's new book. I think that the modern Romanian teen will get a lot out of it. It's set in 1989, which is the year I was married, so it's a while ago. But yeah, that would be my pick.
Well, thank you for having us today. It was a pleasure interviewing you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. It was very much a pleasure to talk.
And I hope our audience enjoyed it too.
Me too.
Thanks for listening in.
Thank you very much.